Go back to where we were, to the text. Okay, so therefore, there's now. So let's talk about reproduction. When a woman gives birth to a baby, there was an extra life within her. There wasn't a soul within her. There was a whole extra life within you that was dependent on you. In other words, we don't see the fetus as separate from the mother. We see them as one entity, but which has sort of a double soul, extra soul. And therefore, when a woman is pregnant, she possesses an enormous, shall we say, overflow of soul. When the baby is born, on one hand, you have a new human being. On the other hand, the soul that was part of her and one with her has departed. So there is a vacuum between the amount of divinity that was within her and the amount of divinity that there's there now. That delta, that distance, that vacuum is tuma. In other words, tuma is wherever there is less divinity than there was before. Since when a woman goes through the menstrual cycle, it means she's not getting pregnant. It means that the potential for pregnancy, the release of the egg and so on, didn't create a baby. So that's a loss, the potential for life. When a man emits semen, whether in intercourse or otherwise, that is a potential for life that is gone. So when the potential for life leaves the person, there is a vacuum, there is a less divinity than there was a moment ago. Because everything physical, especially that relates to life and death and reproduction, which is life and death, possesses in it a profound spiritual power. So its presence is a surfeit of holiness, and its absence, again, the tuma is always the product of an absence vis-a-vis what came before. So a rock is not tameh because a rock never had a lofty soul in it, and so on. That's why vegetables don't become tameh when they die, but certain animals do. And the strongest tuma actually relates to kosher animals because they have a more lofty spiritual self. So that's the basic idea. Any comments or questions?
Question is that I honestly believed, and I don't know where I learned it along the past several decades, that Jewish people believe that the baby does not get its soul till after it's born.
No, that's not correct. What is correct is that what is correct to say is that the baby is not a separate soul until it's born. It's in a state which we call Kabbalistically Ibor pregnancy, just like the physical kind, which means to say the baby's soul is intertwined with the mother and does not enter the baby's body fully until the baby is born.
Okay.
So you're correct, but that's not the whole story.
Okay.
The soul is there, but it's intertwined with the mother's soul, and with the divine and with God, and it doesn't completely enter the baby. It doesn't leave its source and divinity. It doesn't leave the mom until such time as birth happens. That is correct.
So what happens if there's a miscarriage?
When the baby begins breathing on its own, when its head comes out, that's a sign that the soul has entered it, because the Hebrew word for neshama means breath. Soul is breath, which means to say that the physical manifestation of breathing is also the physical manifestation, the spiritual manifestation of an independent being. That's why until the baby begins breathing on its own, the mother's life always trumps the baby's life, even if it's a full-term baby that you have to kill in order to save the mother, as long as the baby has not begun breathing on its own.
So I think Sylvia had a question before I throw another one out there.
You go ahead, Sylvia. Yeah, Sylvia, go ahead.
I wanted to know, is the mother tumei?
Yes, when the baby's born, the mother is tamei for either 14 or 27 or 14 days, depending on whether it's a boy or a girl. Since a girl has greater potential to give life than a boy, the mother is tamei for longer, because when a girl leaves, a greater soul has left, because both life and Judaism transmit through the mother. So the mother's soul is a greater expression of divinity than the father's, than the boy's, and therefore when a girl leaves the mother, there's more tuma because there was more holiness in the first place.
How does
So
that
birth
translate?
definitely creates tuma.
So how does that translate to interaction? What happens with the?
What happens is that after the baby's born, the mother counts 7 or 14 days, and after postpartum bleeding stops, she goes to the mikveh, and then she can once again be physically intimate with her husband. It's the same as the nida, just a little bit longer.
So, can I ask a question that's got not to do with birth, but with the breathing? What do the rabbis think about the state of a person when they're under deep anesthesia and the doctors are doing the breathing for the person while the operation is going on?
So since I'm Jewish, I'm going to answer your question with a question. What about someone who completely flatlines? There's no respiration, the heart is not beating, and we revive them. Was that person dead? Does that person confer tuma while they're not breathing? And the answer is they don't. They're not dead. And the same applies to your question, because breathing is a sign of life. It's not the cause of life.
Okay.
In other words, the fact that a person's breathing tells us for sure there's a soul there. But if the person revives, we knew the soul was there all along. It's a sign, not a cause.
Okay.
The cause is the presence of the soul in the body. If the person comes back to life, it follows that God didn't decide to take their soul yet.
Got it. Okay.
All important questions from a mystical point of view.
By the way, are you
By
on?
the way, I have another question.
Oh.
It's such a pretty canal. Can't people find anywhere else to put their used motor oil containers?
Okay.
Littering is the ultimate expression of human laziness.
Yeah.
Anyways, what was your question, Marcy?
I am very proud to be Jewish, but I had to wince. I had to wince at the ethnocentricity of the statement. And I am, married to a Jew. My kids are married to Jews. But be that as my parents were Jewish. But be that as, but to say that the Jewish soul is a higher soul than
I lost you. Come back, please.
Still in the same place.
Marcy, I lost the whole last 2 minutes. Go back, please, and start again.
Okay, I am totally Jewish. Kids are Jewish. Husband's Jewish. Parents are Jewish. Be that as it may, I had to wince when you said that the Jewish humans have higher souls than non-Jewish humans. I'm proud to be Jewish, but I don't necessarily disparage good people from other.
But see, that's the distinction, Marcy.
Yeah.
Higher is not disparaging. You notice I didn't say that non-Jews have a lower soul. It's an important distinction. We have 613 mitzvot, not all that we can do today.
Right.
Every human being has 7 mitzvot, which include about 100 of the mitzvot in the Torah. Jews are like the Kohanim in this week's Torah portion. Within the Jewish people, Kohanim have a lot of extra rules. We have a lot of extra rules. We have a lot of extra rules because we have a greater task. To fulfill that greater task, we need greater soul power. If a non-Jew says, hey, I want to have that soul power, I want that greater task, and I'm willing to undergo all the persecutions and holocausts and having to take a day off from work every 7 days and not being able to eat pork chops and lobster. Someone says, hey, I want that holiness. I'm willing to pay the price. We take people of all ethnicities and races. Judaism, there's no one who can't become a Jew. But being a Jew means a greater responsibility, which means greater power. Just like a judge or a policeman has greater powers than the ordinary citizen.
Do the other leaders of religions agree with that position?
They may or may not agree. It makes really no difference to me. This is what it says in our holy text, so I know it to be true.
Okay.
It's, whether people agree or not is sort of irrelevant. In
Okay.
other words,
Okay.
the Torah is a function of divine revelation. So if God says something, it's true. The fact that someone might take umbrage or disagree, it's like, you can belong to the flat Earth society all you want, but the Earth is still a globe, or almost a globe, right?
Right. Okay.
This isn't about philosophy. And by the way, there's a famous Jewish book called the Kuzari, famous philosophical work. There's another work written in German and translated to English and Hebrew by Dr. Isaac Breuer from basically the period between World War I and World War II, called Das Neue Kuzari, in German, the New Kuzari. And he makes a very powerful point that Judaism is not built on philosophy or theology. We have a lot of debates in philosophy and theology, even within traditional classical Judaism. But rather, Judaism is about history, that we have this covenant with God that actually happened. We have this text that we actually received from God. We have this oral tradition that we received from God. We received instructions how to use it. So it's about history. It happened or it didn't happen. And since we know it happened, you with me? Because I lost him. Yeah.
I'm listening.
So anyway,
Yes.
that's the point. Judaism is built on history. It's built on the question of fact. And at the same time, we say higher, we don't say lower. In Pirkei Avot, in the second chapter that we just read this week, it says, Kaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem. Beloved is the human being who is created in God's image. Kavivin Yisrael, beloved are the Jewish people on top of that. Shenitam Kli Chemta, that they are given the tools of God's greatest desire, namely the Torah. We begin by praising and appreciating, you've heard this from me many times, every human being. A Jew simply has a greater task and therefore is given the tools for that task. If someone says, I'm willing to undergo all the trouble of being a Jew because I want to be part of that mission, I want to have that particular intense divine revelation, we say gesundheit hate, but no more pork chops. And people might throw stuff at you sometimes. Or worse.
Or worse, yeah.
So what happens to that extra portion of soul and for people who really do not observe, who stand outside?
Right. So the answer is that the first thing is that God judges everyone based on God's accounting. So if someone doesn't know any better, God doesn't judge them harshly. That's number one. Number two, if a person doesn't do what they're supposed to, their soul doesn't permeate them as much as possible. It's like a person who, God forbid, loses the motion of a limb. The potential to move the limb is still there in the brain, but something's wrong with the connection or in the brain itself. In other words, if you think of an electrical system, right? You have all these plugs in your house that drive all these devices. So if a cord is broken, if a wire is broken, even though the power is coming into the house, it won't go to those plugs that the wire is broken, and you got to fix the wire, which is the idea of tshuva. So the point being that light may not permeate every aspect of your being until you fix it, but it's still there potentially. That's why we say no matter how much a Jew sins, they're still a Jew. In other words, in terms of virtue, a virtuous non-Jew is more virtuous, and in that sense, on a higher level than a bad Jew, as if it were. But in terms of potential, the Jew always has that potential because God expects of us, whether in this incarnation or the next, to live up to our potential.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wish everyone a good day. We'll pick up on this parsha on Thursday.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming.
Rabbi, could you please repeat the name of the German author you mentioned?
Yes, Dr. Isaac Breuer, and you can probably find it online in the original German, which I am told is a very elegant, perfect German. Das Neue
Yeah.
Kuzari. And I think you would find the book very interesting.
Dankeschön.
Okay, sei gesund, everyone. Have a
Thank you,
wonderful
Rabbi.
week.
Rabbi.
Good day.
Thank you.